Hi, I'm Adam R. Jacobsen, Editor-in-Chief of the Radio and Television Business Report, coming to you from fabulous Las Vegas during the National Association of Broadcasters Convention for an exclusive podcast to discuss an article published in RBR.com in 2017 called Deal Killers. What are they and how to avoid them? With me are the authors of the article, Doug Ferber, the CEO of DEFcom Advisors, a Dallas-based media broker, and Erwin Krasnow, the co-chair of the communications group of Garvey, Schubert, Bearer. Also with me today are the operating partners of community broadcasters. I have Bruce Mittman, Jim Leven, and controller Peter Henderson here as well in Las Vegas. Their company owns and operates 46 radio stations in 8 great markets. And hello, gentlemen. It's great to see you all here in Las Vegas, and thank you for joining for this first in a series of podcasts.
Hi, Adam.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I have Erwin with me, too, and I understand that he's the Mel Brooks of the media law community, so maybe we'll get some good jokes out of this.
Did you bring your best joke today?
Instead of a joke, I'm going to start with a story.
Okay.
A story with a moral to it, and a story that's instructive to the topic of the day, deal killers. Woman decides she wants a divorce. So she does her due diligence. She goes to the Yellow Pages, this is an old joke, and finds the name of a lawyer, goes to the lawyer's office, and she says, "Sir, will you handle my divorce?" He said, "Sure, I've done a lot of these. I just need some information." And he asked, "Do you have grounds?" She said, "Yes, I do, about 1.5 acres." He says, No, do you have a garage?" She says, "Actually, that's an interesting question. I have a 2-car garage, but it's only 2 compact cars." The exasperation, he said, "Here's another question I have for you. Does your husband beat you up?" And she says, "Well, actually, I get up a half an hour before he does every day." And then he says, "Well, just tell me, why do you think I can argue your case?" She said, "Well, for some reason, my husband has difficulty communicating with me." So that's what all of this is about, is communication. And that really goes to the essence of deals. I was motivated with Doug to put together a series of horror stories about deals that went wrong, that went sour. And a large part of it was lack of communication. Sellers and buyers not on the same wavelength. Or worse, sellers and buyers that didn't like each other or didn't respect each other. So in situations where the seller and buyer are uncomfortable with each other, as a lawyer, no matter what issue comes up, it's contentious and takes a long time to resolve. If they like each other, if the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy, then virtually any issue that comes up can be resolved.
So why don't we go right into the first of our deal killers that we're going to be talking about in this podcast series. The first one is unrealistic price expectations.
I find myself always going back to when somebody asks me, before they go out, what's my company worth? I always find myself going back to, you can have the greatest station group in the world, but if there's not a good buyer pool, then that's really what dictates the price. So to me, that's what my job is as a broker, to help people to understand what the market is for their company at any particular time. So, Bruce, do you have any?
Well, I think that there's no deal we've ever entered where the buyer didn't have expectations and the seller didn't have expectations and we didn't have expectations on our end, which didn't meet. I think the buyer always thinks their properties are worth more and the seller always thinks they're worth less, or the other way around. And as the buyer, depending upon how you're buying it, also determines what you want to pay for it. If you have to leverage the deal at an aggressive level, then obviously you need to bring the price down. If you're going to pay cash for the deal, you're probably a little bit more flexible in terms of how you want to pay it. So, how it's financially structured really comes to play in terms of valuations and perceptions of value.
So how you structure it is a way of bridging the gap between the seller and buyer.
Sure.
And the obvious one is seller paper, and there's all sorts of negotiating tactics in an effort to get people to agree. If the buyer's not ready but is willing to commit to paying a lot of money, they could enter an LMA and have an option to buy. If the seller has mixed feelings about getting out of the business, the buyer might offer to have the seller be involved in small part in the company. So people have to be, so instead of just saying my price is X and there's no agreement on that and the conversation ends, there's the need to have more communication.
Yeah, I think it's also a function of creativity. I mean, communication, I agree, certainly you need communication, but it's really about how creative both sides can be. And then it comes down to, do you want to sell and do you really want to buy? And then if both do, then they'll come together with something creative that represents both goals. And I think that's really, if it's not a win-win, at the end of the day, A, it won't happen, or B, if it does, it's probably not going to be a good deal for either side.
Yeah, I think that's right. And as Erwin said, in some circumstances, one might have the seller operate the property for a fixed period of time after the buyer has bought the property, or an LMA structured where the LMA fees become part of the purchase price for a fixed period of time, or at an option date or time that works for both the buyer and seller to make it more palatable.
And also, when some people were betting on the auction, they would buy a Class A station and then have the seller operate the station after they bought it, because they knew nothing about the business, but they were in the game to sell off the frequency.
Typically, I think anyway, in some cases, sellers have unrealistic price expectations because they don't do enough homework beforehand and they don't prepare enough. And we'll get into that, I guess, Adam, in a little while.
Sure.
But, I think they go out without a lot of or enough preparation and market knowledge to know what's going to happen. And that can be dangerous because then you're looking at, a deal that could be overshot or on the market too long. It's like the same thing as a house. If it stays on the market too long, as Bill Stedding used to tell me back in the day, if a fish lays on the beach too long, it starts to take on the odor.
But a lot of that has to do with people. Some people are unreasonable, others are reasonable, some are flexible, some are not flexible. And unfortunately, if you're dealing with someone that's not reasonable, it's just not going to happen. If you're dealing with someone who's flexible, willing to sit back and recognize that at the end of the day they want to get a deal done, then you'll get a deal done. So,
Yeah, and we've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
Where the seller was just in outer space,
Yeah.
on another planet, and nice people, but it just was never going to happen.
And you got to wait for them to come
Exactly
land
right.
back on Earth before they're
Right.
ready to.
Exactly
do
right.
something.
Right.
So another way of putting it is the deal killer in some situations will be the parties, will be the seller or the buyer, and because of the personality characteristics, that there's no way that this deal is going to succeed.
Right, and to get back to the price expectations, the buyer can have unrealistic price expectations too. I want to buy this at 4 times cash flow.
I've never met a buyer, including myself, that has realistic expectations. So, the goal is, you got to buy it for the best price you can, especially because there's operating costs, there's banks involved, there's lots of stuff. So you got to buy it as best you can. As I said, if you can be respectful at the end of the day and everybody can win, then you'll get a deal done.
Yeah, if you were to ask us, obviously, as a buyer, the current multiple is 3 times, and as a seller, it's got to be 12.
Well,
Right,
at least.
exactly.
At least.
Forward.
I like your math.
Forward cash.
So that covers number one, and we certainly have a lot more to discuss. So please don't miss finding out about all the killers of broadcast station acquisitions and future podcasts. So I want to thank all my guests here. This is Adam R. Jacobsen from the Radio and Television Business Report. Have a great day.